And I think you're going to be pretty much blown away by what I share with you later on, right? I'm going to show you something on the screen. You're going to be like, what? There's no freaking way, right? What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video. If you guys are hanging out with me for the first time, please consider subscribing to the channel. And while you guys are at it, go ahead and smash that like button. I would totally appreciate that. Well, guys, I don't know how many of you guys are like me where you don't quite make enough money and you're living paycheck to paycheck and you're literally just tired of being broke. Well, I found myself in this situation personally back in 2008 during the Great Recession. And I didn't know it was the Great Recession at the time. The Federal Reserve was on the news almost every single day. And at the time, the housing market was shifting. And this was shortly after my wife and I had purchased our very first home to live in. And she was actually pregnant at the time. And I was literally just stressed the heck out, right? And so I was trying to figure out, how do I survive this economic mess? The Federal Reserve was trying to manage this housing market crisis, very similar to what we're dealing with now. But to me, I think it was actually worse in 2008 than today, if I'm being 100% transparent. The amount of layoffs that were taking place then versus now is just totally different. And I don't feel like the world is coming to an end. But back then I did. And I then started thinking, okay, if I lose my job, what am I going to do? The Federal Reserve was raising or lowering interest rates, trying to stave off this economic collapse. And they've been doing the same thing today. Well, technically, 2 years ago they were doing that. Over the last 18 months, they've been raising interest rates, which is slightly different. That's a slightly different dynamic compared to what they had done before. But what I ended up deciding to do was, I said, you know what? Instead of being worried about losing my job, let me sacrifice a little bit of time right now and secure my family. So I started looking for another job. And in fact, I was actually looking for a part-time job, but I couldn't find one that was paying worth anything. So I ended up finding a second full-time job that literally doubled my income overnight. And what I discovered by getting this second job completely changed my life from that moment forward. Now, I ain't gonna even lie to you guys. Like, when I told my friends I was about to do this, like to work 2 full-time jobs, they literally thought I was crazy, right? But me, I got my calculator out and I was like, yo, I know I'm gonna be like dead tired, but this could be like super duper worth it. Like, I could get out of debt, I can invest this money. Like I was like, yo, if I could like literally save an extra $50,000 a year, like this could be life changing, right? But of course, a lot of my friends were like, man, that's crazy. Like, you're not gonna be able to sleep, you're not gonna be able to hang out. But for me, my goals were a little bit different. But comment down below if you guys have goals that are a little bit different than your friends. Hopefully you have supportive friends, which I do have some supportive friends, which is cool, but not everybody understood what I was trying to do. And I want to share this with you guys. I don't know how many of you guys realize, but the average American today is only making about $50,000 per year. And if you're earning $50,000 per year here in America, in most cases, you're probably not super duper comfortable just because the cost of living is so high. And since the Federal Reserve has lowered interest rates going into 2020 up until about 2022, this created a massive amount of inflation in our economy. So everything is tremendously more expensive. And so $50,000 per year just doesn't go quite as far. But I will say this. I took the second job, and it was definitely a challenge to work 2 full-time jobs at the time. But I said to myself, wow, if I literally doubled my income, but I did not increase my expenses, I could literally become financially free if I can do this thing long enough. And when I say financially free, like literally, if you doubled your income and didn't increase your expenses, you could become a millionaire. And I began reading more and more about millionaires and how they use their money to do smart things with it. How do they grow their net worth? How do they invest? How do they approach money? So I began reading more and more about millionaires during one of my jobs, because one of the jobs was not very active. So I was able to spend time reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Millionaire Next Door, The 4-Hour Work Week, and many other different highly valuable and influential books. And I was reading about Warren Buffett's investment strategy, the Intelligent Investor. I was reading up on so many different investment related books, even stock trading and whatnot. So then I started doing the math, and I said to myself, well, what's one way I can invest $50,000, right? Because if I increase my income, and I literally doubled it, and my second job was literally paying a little more than $50,000 per year, I had $50,000 left over to do whatever I want with. So after I got out of debt, of course, immediately I paid off my debts as quickly as possible, eliminated my car payment, my credit cards. But then I said to myself, hey, if I invest $50,000, which is roughly about $4,100 a month, this money could grow and compound into something very, very, very life-changing. So I started doing the math, and I realized, hey, I need to start putting this money to work. So I started doing research on different types of investments. And one of the investments I came across was, there's stocks and ETFs and whatnot, but one of the investments I came across was SCHD. And SCHD essentially is a Charles Schwab ETF index fund. Actually, it's an ETF, not an index fund. But ETFs and index funds are very similar. But simple fact of the matter is that I decided to pull the trigger and start my investment journey, so to speak. And when I did this, it totally changed my life. And I think that once I share this with you, it will probably drastically change yours as well. So imagine, the goal is to become financially free, hopefully become a millionaire one day. So how do you accomplish this? Well, there's a lot of different ways you can accomplish this, but I'm going to share with you guys some very interesting information, and I'd love to hear your feedback in the comment section down below. Now, if you think about it, like one of the primary goals for, pretty much all dividend growth investors is very, very simple. Like, ultimately, we want to generate passive income, might want to quit our jobs, and I think that by the time I fully explain this to you, you're probably going to be in a situation, if you execute this, to be able to probably quit your job as well. So basically, this particular strategy that I want to share with you guys, it can gradually increase your annual dividend income to a point where basically it could cover all of your living expenses. And especially in this very high cost of living society that we're in, this would be tremendously valuable to anyone and everyone. Like, who wouldn't want to have all their living expenses just completely paid for? And that way you don't have to lean on your active income from your day job. You could literally live off of the passive income generated from your investments. Now, at this stage of the game, the dividend investors would basically, essentially achieve financial freedom, which is pretty much the main objective for most dividend investors, including myself, right? Why reinvent the wheel if you don't have to? There's many different tried and true methods to achieve a goal without exerting excessive effort, right? I'm I'm probably the worst person to execute things, because I always want to make things overly complicated, and it just doesn't have to be that way. And so in this video, I want to share with you guys some very exceptional long-term growth ETFs that are available in the current market. And this is, at least in my opinion, how you could leverage $50,000 to just completely change your life, and to ultimately help pretty much any investor to achieve financial freedom. Now, of course, this is not financial advice, but this is just something that I discovered, and it totally changed my life. And I feel like it could change someone else's, so I decided to make this video. And so, the dividend income that's generated from, this ETF, it could potentially exceed the earnings from your day job. And before I go any further, please do your boy a favor, drop a quick like for the video. Also subscribe to the channel. There's a number of different investment opportunities. Particularly, there's a lot of different high yield, high quality dividend growth ETFs. that theoretically could guide investors, toward the same destination. Now, ultimately, I want to talk really about one ETF in particular, and this one is SCHD. Now, for those who might not be super familiar with SCHD, this is the Charles Schwab U.S. Dividend Equity ETF. Now, the main goal for this ETF is it closely tracks, before fees and, the total return of the Dow Jones Industrial or the Dow Jones U.S. 100 Index. Now, SCHD is actually managed, and it was launched by Charles Schwab. Now, this ETF, it invests in U.S. markets, holding stocks across different sectors like energy, materials, industrials, consumer discretionary, like a lot of different sectors, healthcare, financials, information technology. And so, it basically includes both growth and value stocks across a diverse market capitalization. And as the name suggests, it invests in dividend-paying stocks. Now, this is the key here, guys. So, like a few crucial details regarding this particular investment vehicle. We're talking about SCHD here. SCHD was actually started in October of 2021. October 2011. So it's been around for a minute. And this particular ETF, it's been in existence for a long time. So this is like what, about 12 years. So it's got a long track record. Now, obviously, while past performance doesn't necessarily guarantee future results, having some historical data to look back at is definitely helpful. So SCHD, this particular Schwab U.S. Dividend Equity ETF, is one of the largest ETFs in the market. And it's got like $49 billion in total net assets. And its expense ratio is pretty low. It's sitting at like 0.06%. So this affordably makes it very attractive for most long-term investors. As long as, their investments grow over time, I think most investors are going to be pretty happy. Now, as we talked about earlier in the video, the underlying index for SCHD, it's the Dow Jones U.S. Dividend 100 Index, right? So I'm gonna deep dive into this. Let me get my computer up here, and I want to share with you guys why this is so important. So, looking a little bit closer at SCHD, it's currently trading around $74 a share. Now, for long-term investors, this could potentially present some serious buying opportunities, as it's relatively close to the midpoint of its 52-week trading average, right? And so this average is spanning between $65.96 all the way up to $79.49. Now, over the last 12, 13 years, SCHD has recorded a growth of about 185%. And this is going to be very, very important, guys, so take note. And keep in mind that this figure does not include dividends. So technically, the rate of return is even higher than that. And I'm going to share that the total growth with you guys, including the dividends, a little bit later in this video. And I think you're going to be pretty much blown away by what I share with you later on, right? I'm going to show you something on the screen. And you're going to be like, what? There's no freaking way, right? And I decided to literally say to myself, hey, if I just sacrifice 1 year, like what would happen, right? And so I'll tell you what, something amazing happens. But one of the most compelling factors is that SCHD's extensive diversification. And that's very important to me. I don't want to hold one stock and that stock goes down and it takes out my whole portfolio. Like, that would be horrible. Like, imagine like you were fully invested in like, what was that bank stock? Silicon Valley Bank or First Republic Bank or Lehman Brothers. Like, that would be horrible, right? So diversification is key for me. And its holdings surpass, it encompasses like all these various sectors that I mentioned earlier. You got 18% sitting in financials. You got 15% in healthcare, consumer defensive sitting at 12%. You got technology at 12%, consumer cyclicals at 9%, energy at 9%, communications at 4%. Basic materials at 2%, and utilities at a little bit under 1%. So you're all over the place in terms of the types of investments that SCH is invested in. And with such a diversified ETF, you really don't have to worry too much about the performance of one, two, or even three specific stocks. And that's kind of why I like it. I like passive investments that I don't have to actively be babysitting. And among the top 10 holdings, you got companies like Broadcom, Home Depot, Abbott, Cisco, UPS, Pepsi. Like, these are companies we've heard of. Coca-Cola, Amgen, Chevron, and Texas Instruments. And these companies, they do share a few common traits. Longevity, history of paying dividend payments, which is what we're after here, and consistent dividend increases over the long haul, which brings me to the next point of why I really like this particular ETF, right? So SCHD, it has a very impressive 12-month dividend yield of 3.51%. And, while 3.5% might necessarily, it's not the highest starting yield in the stock market or in the ETF market, but if you think about like the fact that the capital appreciation that this ETF has experienced over the last 5 or 10 years, if history repeats itself, which to me, I think it's likely, but if history repeats itself, investors could potentially benefit not only from dividends, but also from the ETF's price appreciation over the long term. So another very crucial metric that you want to be aware of is SCHD's trailing 12-month dividend growth rate. And this stands at 7.13%. Now, this growth rate is an annualized percentage representing the increase in a dividend compared to the preceding 12-month period. Now, of course, a higher dividend growth rate is more favorable, and SCHD, if you compare it to a lot of the other ETFs, it's got a notably higher dividend growth rate. Now, over the last 3 years, it's been 12.33%. The last 5 years has seen 13.92%. And over the last 10 years, it's sitting at around 11.32%. Now, although the most recent 12-month dividend growth rate is currently, sitting at about 7.13%, if SCHD experiences significant dividend raises in the upcoming quarters, it's very likely that this rate will actually surpass 10% yet again. And so this means that investors who get in early, they could, anticipate growing quarterly payments in the future. Now, the thing about getting in early is that when you get in early, you have less of a guarantee. But with that lesser guarantee, you are rewarded. It's kind of like if you have a guaranteed rate of return from your savings bank account, there's like no risk because it's FDIC insured. And so your rate of return is going to be lower. There's minimal risk. But if you invest in someone's company from the start and it turns into to be like Facebook, or it turns into Amazon, or if it turns into a Tesla, then obviously the rate of return would be much greater, right? So, but the risk is, what if it doesn't do anything? So now if we talk about the increasing of dividends over time, looking at SCHD's dividend history since its inception, this particular ETF initially paid out around 14 cents a share per quarter. But right now, it's pretty much surged to about 66 or 70 cents per share per quarter. Now, we're not just talking about pennies here. This is huge. And this represents a dividend payout of around a dividend payout increase of around 4 or 5 times compared to the amount that it first started paying out 4 or 5 years ago. So the significance of dividend growth rate becomes very apparent when you think about, a hypothetical scenario with, an initial investment of, say, $50,000 and you reinvest those dividends. Now, this setup, it really shows how a relatively modest initial investment into a fund like SCHD compared to, a real solid starting dividend and robust dividend growth can actually lead to substantial growth in both the initial principal and the overall dividends that are generated over time. Now, with that being said, let's have a look at, let's take a look at this dividend calculator right here, right? So, let's just say hypothetically an investor would have put in like $50,000 into SCHD relatively early in their investment journey, right? And let's just assume that a starting dividend yield around 3.49% and an annual dividend increase of about, let's just say 8%, which could naturally vary, of course, anticipated annual share price appreciation of roughly 4%. And let's go with a dividend reinvestment being enabled on this one, because we want this money to grow. We don't want to just blow the dividends. We want to keep reinvesting them, right? Set up our drip plan. This investment could significantly grow over the next 30 years. Now, let's look at some of the specifics on this dividend example, right? So in the first year of investing, the individual would hypothetically invest about $50,000 into SCHD's ETF, and this would end up resulting in an initial annual dividend of around $1,767, with no extra money, no extra contributions being reinvested or being added to this, but you will be reinvesting all the dividends that you're paid. So the principal will grow to $53,000, and it will be accompanied by an annual dividend of $1,965. Now, we're going to start seeing this balance start to compound as we go through this, right? And you're going to notice how these annual dividends become increasingly substantial. And this is due to the reinvestment of the dividends to purchase more SCHD shares. And we're also leveraging the historical trend of SCHD raising its dividends. And so this could mean that over time, investors could actually anticipate receiving higher payments. So in the fifth year, the individual, would hold about $65,000 worth of SCHD stock or SCHD ETF, and they will receive over $2,700 in annual dividends. Yes, so we're making progress here. Now, 10 years into this investment, remember, we didn't put any more of our own money in here, right? 10 years into this investment, the portfolio will reach $100,000, generating about $4,800 annually in dividends. And then 15 years out, the value could reach just under $145,000 with dividends hitting about $9,000 a year. Complete passive income, guys. Now, between the 15th and the 30th years, the power of compound interest really becomes just explosive. I mean, like, the numbers begin to just kind of grow at a very accelerated rate, and we can see the long-term effects of dividend investments and reinvesting the dividends on this chart here. So, for instance, like in the 20th year, an investment of $228,000 in SCHD could easily yield just shy of $17,000 annually in dividends. In the 25th year, with an investment of $381,000, the dividends could hit about $34,000 a year. Some people don't even make $34,000 a year. You would be making this in passive income. And then by the 30th year, an initial investment of $50,000 could potentially lead to a portfolio value of $670,000 invested in SCHD, with dividends hitting about $73,000 a year. Now, this example really just shows exactly the point that I'm trying to make here, that investors don't necessarily need millions of dollars to invest in high quality dividend growth ETFs like SCHD or other options out there, right? But you could become a millionaire if you added a little bit more to this, which you can do. But in this example, we're just putting in $50,000 at one time. But it also emphasizes, that those who remain invested for the long term and they allow their dividends to compound over time would be able to see substantial growth in both their portfolio value and their annual dividends received. Now, I just want to hear from you guys. What do you guys think about this strategy? I hope you guys are enjoying the day. Such a beautiful day outside. Let me know what you guys are thinking. Let me know if you want to quit your job and generate passive income. Let me know if you have your favorite ETF or other investment strategy. I'd love to hear about it, because I'm always open and interested in learning what other investors are doing. But drop me some comments, guys. I really hope you enjoyed this video. And let me know what you think. Share it, like it, comment. I'll see you on the next one.